Hello there. I'm MapleDungeons, and today I'm going to be going over some tournament strategy. This time for the third tournament map, the Battle of Kyhlo. Before I get into everything, I'm just going to give sort of a warning. Most of this is meant to be geared towards newer players to the tournament scene, and by that basic fact, is more geared towards free tournaments, as that is my experience. Although I'm sure lots of the lessons here could be used to go into paid tournaments as well, as they're just the same thing, but with a higher caliber of team. Similarly, this can also be used, I'm sure, to help you a little bit in pug matches, in AF8 hot joins, but it is not geared towards that, although some of the footage you may see in the background may be taken from that just to demonstrate points, and because it is easier to get a hold of than doing a whole free tournament. With that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the map. Kyhlo is a very balanced, fun, and interesting map. It is 3 points. The mansion and the windmill make up the side points, and then the clock tower, being the big point in the middle, on top of a clock tower, is high up in elevation. The unique mechanic the map offers is the trebuchets. Each team gets a trebuchet that can be aimed and fired at pretty much anywhere in the map. When hit by the treb, people take quite a bit of damage and get knocked back. The trebuchet can be destroyed by the players of the enemy team by doing enough damage to it, and once it is, it can be repaired by your team by grabbing a repair kit from the other side of the map. While holding the repair kit though, you will have access to 0 of your abilities, so it's quite risky and can get you killed. So when thinking of initial strategies on this map, you really have 5 places to send people. You have your point, you have mid, you have the enemy point, you have your treb, and you have the enemy treb. You could just send one to each, right, and hope for the best? Well, yeah, and that might actually be a working strategy in the right situation, but as per usual, it really depends on your comp and your enemy's comp. First thing first, you need to kill the enemy treb. A treb is worth more than a player, and unless they have 2 guarding their treb, you need to be able to keep it down. If it's firing, you're at a disadvantage. To do this, to keep the treb down, you generally want to send one person who can 1v1 very well. Thieves can be effective for this. Elementalists are often the best, as they can dwindle down the treb while not dying very quickly. It's also very possible to send a full-on bunker to the enemy trebuchet, but that is sort of a waste, and only do it if you really have an extremely defensive team with an excess of bunkers, because there's other places where they are better put to use. The next thing that needs to be covered is the midpoint, the clock tower. You can send multiple people here, start a fight. It's always an option and can win the point for you. If, however, you are going to be sending one person mid, it really has to be a certain thing. First of all, it needs to be extremely tanky. It needs to have extremely high survivability. And secondly, it also needs to have some knockback to neutralize or cap the point. A Guardian generally fits this role the best, and is why you will often see Guardian bunkers sent mid-solo. If you send lots against them, they will survive quite a while, and if you send one against them, they'll have a nice fight on their hands in order to see who can knock off the other. The only other option I can really see working out too well in that position is an engineer. They're actually going to have more knockback potential than a Guardian, and while they can be less survivable overall, and they're missing some stability, they actually can get a lot of extra dodges for avoiding treb shots. After that, if you have a second player on your team that can bunker a point, you generally want to put them on your point. If you don't have that, you're gonna want to get a roamer to cap your point, and then play a little more offensively. So, I've covered the necessities. Your point, mid, and the enemy treb are necessary places to go. From there, you can decide to allocate your remaining forces, 2 people generally, to support these points, or to go for the remaining 2 objectives. Your treb is a very useful tool, and can even win games for you. but it's not 100% necessary all the time. There are some good teams that just ignore their treb and fight themselves 5-man. Oftentimes you will want to send one to your treb at the start, and the most effective for that can be the Mesmer. The Mesmer can use its portal to get the treb repaired more quickly by dropping a portal on the treb and when it's going down, leaving, and then picking up the repair kit and portaling right back. By the way, that can be countered by leaving the treb at extremely low HP, but they will come back and use it a bit more and can be wasted. Anyway, whoever you send to the treb needs to be able to 1v1 reasonably well. If you look at your enemy's team comp, estimate who your trebber could be facing, and they're confident, then go ahead with using the treb. If not, you can ignore it entirely. Or, alternatively, you can actually have two on it. Having a good duo defend your treb can be extremely potent, as the enemy will have to send at least two of their own in order to get your treb down. The best for this is generally two bursty classes. They can be coordinated well to kill enemies fast. What I've seen work very well together is a Mesmer and a Thief. The Mesmer firing the treb and the Thief being able to roam out and help out at different points when the treb is not under fire. Finally, you have the option of hitting the enemy point. There's a couple ways to do it. First off, you can just send one man there, either a bunker or someone who can 1v1 extremely well. This is something you want to do depending on their team. If, say, they have two guardians, don't go for the strategy. If they have something more squishy guard in their point, then it is ideal to do this strategy. Another thing to do is sending 2 to 3 to their point. This involves ignoring your treb, ignoring mid, or both. It's an extremely risky decision, and I'd only do the ignoring mid part if you're running an extremely aggressive comp with a lot of damage and not so much bunkers. But it is a legit strat to ignore treb and go their point. So now that I feel like I've rambled on quite a bit, let me wrap up starting strategies by saying which ones I think work best. Number 1, basic strategy: 1 your point, 1 mid, 1 their treb, 1 your treb, and the final player either goes to the enemy point or to help out with the enemy treb. Strat number 2, mid rush. Here you send 1 to your point, 1 enemy treb, and then either 2 mid and 1 treb, or just 3 mid, straight up send 3 mid, zerk it down, get that point. Strat number 3, focus the treb. Here you do the basic 1-1-1 again, but keep 2 guarding your treb. Strat number 4, ignore treb, go for their point. You do the basic 1-1-1 again, but now send 2 to the enemy point to cap it, hopefully resulting in either an easy cap on their point or an easy cap of mid. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about the rest of the game. What you'll be doing really depends on whether you had some initial success. If you manage to capture 2 points, you are going to want to defend them. It's much easier to defend 2 adjacent points, i.e. the clock tower and 1 side point. The clock tower in general is the best strategic point to hold due to its position with its proximity to everything in the map, and due to its elevation, making it hard to get to and easier to defend. So if you're in that ideal position, you may want to send some offensive players to the enemy point to pressure it, but you don't want to overcommit. It's not really worth it to trade mid for a side point, so never leave it completely unless it's absolutely necessary. On the other hand, if you have 2 side points on your opponent, while you are in a winning spot, it is totally worth it for you to trade a point for mid. If they're not stacking players in mid, send people there to take it, as well as focus the treb there. You should keep 1 to defend your point, to defend the enemy point, but if you're sure of tapping mid, you can abandon said side point and go back to your ideal position of 1 side point and mid, preferably your side point. If you do not get an initial victory and you get wiped out, chances are you'll have to be rezzing up to your only point being assaulted. You want to send whatever players are necessary there to defend it. Make sure they are necessary and make sure they aren't there too long. To expand on that a little, during a game someone might need help on a point. That doesn't always mean they need you to be there until everyone on that point is dead. Once you have the opponent down, or even just burnt down to a little bit of HP, it can be okay to leave if you're needed elsewhere. Sometimes that's all it's needed. Sometimes all it's needed is a quick burst of damage and then going right back out. So keep that in mind and don't always overcommit to a point. Anyway, situation here. You're losing. The enemy has 2 points. You have 1. You need to take a point. If a side point seems easily capturable, go for it. Otherwise, you're going to want to take mid. There's probably going to be something tanky sitting on it, so you're going to want to have anyone not defending or trebbing hitting that point together. You do not want to stream into a point. Let me repeat myself. You do not want to stream into a point. Even if you have one guy on a full res timer, wait for the guy. Go in together. Communicate, focus targets, get stomps and reses off, and win yourself the point. If you fail, either go back and try again, or try for the other point. Constantly keep track of whether the enemy has someone guarding their off point. And as soon as it seems they don't, have someone ready to peel off and grab that point. From here, continue as mentioned before. If you're in a defensive position, stay defensive while putting on pressure and trading points when needed and possible. When you're down and in a defensive position, just remember not to be too hasty. Stay calm, gather yourselves, and go in together. Go for whichever point has the weaker defense, but if they're about equal, always pick the clock tower. During all of this, whether in an offensive or a defensive position, you really need to be worrying about the trebuchets. Other than the obvious and having any players on your treb supporting whichever point needs it, you need to be watching what they are doing with their treb. If you initially fail to kill the trebuchet, you need to go back or send another player if they'll handle it more efficiently. If you do have the treb down, be on the lookout for the message of the enemy picking up the trebuchet. If it's a mesmer, they may just portal back with a kit and then you'll need to go back and down it immediately. If not, they'll be running across the map with no abilities. So if you can have someone intercept them while they're running back with the kit, do it. It's extremely potent. And with all that said, there isn't too much left to talk about. One thing I should probably just remind of is that your opponents will be doing everything I've talked about, and a lot more. Be ready for your pressure on your points, keep track of all the enemies you can see in order to know where the enemies you can't see are, and what they're doing. If you don't see them for a while after being wiped, perhaps they're up to something not so good. Perhaps they're grouping up, so be ready, maybe even intercept them with some good CC-based players, or player. The last thing I guess there's to talk about is some more minor combat tactics in different areas of the map. First off, both side points have a little fence on the back side of them. The fence is something you need to watch out for, and something you may find useful if trying to defend the point. The fence, or in the case of one of the points, the little hinge behind it, will block a lot of knockbacks. Some will go over it, but a lot will be stopped in their place, so it's a good idea to just hump it in defense. Or if you're trying to knock someone away, then just aim elsewhere. In terms of avoiding knockbacks on the midpoint, there isn't too much to do. You just have to stay as close to possible as the middle of the point, and use normal techniques such as dodging and using stability to avoid that kind of thing. If you're having a larger fight in the mid and you're ranged, it's often very useful to just sit in the window and fire from there. While it may limit some of your abilities, it'll put less of a target on your back and it'll make you easier to disengage if you need to do so. Combat in the trebuchets, well, if you are worried about knockoffs, you need to play closer to the ramp. It's pretty simple. If you want to get knockbacks, then you are going to want to play closer to the edge. If you're defending, draw them away from the trebuchet as much as possible. And if you're attacking, try and get them near it so you can AoE attack both the enemy player and the treb. With that said, I guess I should draw a conclusion to this video. To review a little, here is a few points. 1. Play an initial strat that goes well with your team's strengths. 2. Grab whichever points are the weakest, but Clock Tower is always the best to hold. 3. The most important thing is your enemy's trebuchet. If they get more than a couple of shots off in a row, you're doing it wrong. 4. Your trev is nice too, but it's okay to ditch it in some situations. And 5. In the end, it comes down to fighting skill. Either your skill in defending a point, your skill in knocking the enemy off a point, or your skill in taking enemies down. Strategy will go a long way, but it is only less than half of the whole picture. Good luck, guys. Have fun playing some Kyhlo, and let me know how all this works out for you. Any extra tips, tricks, or explanations on why everything I've said is totally wrong are welcome. Thank you so much for watching, guys. For more similar content in the future, you can subscribe to the channel and let me know. I've been MapleDungeons, and I'll see you next time.